Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right, okay. All right, so has anybody in the audience been to one of my talks before? Okay. You poor souls are going to see some stuff you've already seen. Although I definitely bring new stuff every time. But you know, you're going to run across some things that you've seen before. So we're going to start out with, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where I come from, how it is that I got to designing pinball machines, and I'm going to show you some of my work. I'm a professional designer, which means I went to school and I got a degree in design, and then I was fortunate enough to go to work at a game company, because that's sort of what I was interested in when I was 22 years old. So let's fire this thing up here. All right, so you can see the calendar on my wall. It says July of 1982. And a lot of people tell me that I don't age. I'm 56 years old, but honestly, I do age. The picture is proof. You can also see that you know, I used to do work. Probably, I actually feel very fortunate about this. I've spent half of my, well, at this point, it's a little bit less than half of my professional career working in traditional methods. Some large part of my design work was produced using you know, drafting machines and you know, 2H pencils and magic markers. I still sketch a lot, and so I still use some of that stuff because it's a really quick way for me to express myself. But I am absolutely in love and fascinated with all of my newfangled computer tools. And so just some new, more powerful wrenches than the ones that I used to use. So James Bond has a license to kill, and my degree gives me a license to thrill. So I started out, you know, in October of 1978. I walked in the door at Midway Games. This is when Midway was owned by Bally, and Bally was making pinball machines, and Midway was making coin-operated video games. And so I actually started out because I was playing a Midway game at the arcade at school, and I thought it was really bad. And I was looking at this thing, and I kept thinking, man, this is so horrible. I can do better than this. So with all the arrogance of a 22-year-old, I called Midway, and I said, I'm a designer, and you really need me. And luckily, I was talking to a guy in the human resources department, and he said, well, you know, we're hiring a lot of guys. You know, come on in, kid. And so, so from the time I graduated in May of 1978 from design school, and I had a teacher that had said, you know, you should design something you have a passion for. And all the guys around me were designing other things. You know, they were like, you know, there was a guy that was into chairs, and there was a guy that was into like consumer electronics, and there was a guy that wanted to go to the car business. And you know, I sort of had an interest in lots of stuff, and I couldn't figure out what to do. And the same guy had said to me, if you go to a place where they don't know what you do, you can be a big fish in a little pond, because you're going to bring skills that they don't have. So, so from the time that I made that fateful call to Midway, and the time that I actually got my interview, like 3 weeks later, I went to the arcades. There was no internet at the time, and I took pictures with a Polaroid camera. Remember those? Yeah. Of every Midway game I could find. And I went home and I redesigned a section of my portfolio in terms of all these Midway games. Like, you know, this game sucks, this is what I would do. This, you know, you guys, this is ugly, this is boring, etc. So when I walked through the door at Midway, how I got my job is these guys were like blown away that here's all this stuff, and it's like, and I didn't really know what I was doing. You know, it was basically ignorance, but they saw some potential and they gave me a job. So you know, I'll never forget they were manufacturing Space Invaders for Tidal at the time under license. And I was interviewing in the office area, and you know, engineering was like a row of drafting tables. You know, no computers. The only guys that had computers at the time were the electrical guys, electronics engineers, and the software guys had computers. Everybody else had drafting tables. So I come out, my boss is giving me the tour, and he throws open the doors to the factory, and it was like that scene in Indiana Jones where, like, you know, in one-point perspective, the factory went off into eternity, and as far as you could see, there were like Space Invaders machines on the assembly line. You know, there was all these air tools, you know, all these guys working on these machines, and I was just blown away. I was like, okay, this is home. So it was not exactly, you know, nobody said to me that on day 2, nobody said to me, okay, kid, here, design a game. I had to really fight to get to the point where I could design games. What does that mean? That means that they looked at my stuff and they said, well, he can draw and he can, you know, he can make things, but, you know, I don't know what to do with them. So they stuck me in the mechanical engineering department, because I was like a really strange bird. I was this guy that was kind of like a cross between an artist and an engineer. They didn't really know what to do with me, because they had mechanical engineers, they had electrical engineers, and they had software guys, and they had, on the pinball side of the world, they had designers, but they didn't really know what to do with me over on the video game side. So they kind of stuck me. They had artists. And they said, well, he's more than the artist, he's less than the mechanical guys, he's, you know, somewhere in between. So they stuck me in the mechanical engineering department, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I actually hated my first 6 months, but I learned so much from those guys, and at first they hated me, and they tried to kill me every day. And the reason they tried to kill me every day, everybody hated me. The software guys hated me, the mechanical engineers hated me, everybody hated me, because the software guys would make a block, and they would put it on the screen, and they'd say, look, this is a tank. And I'd say, no, it's not. Here, that's a tank. And they would go, whoa, this guy is a witch. He's voodoo. So they all wanted to kill me. They all hated me. I was a threat. And then one day, some smart guys decided that, you know what, they never pay attention to the block that we call a tank moving on the screen. But when Gomez makes a sketch, they pay attention to that. So there was these guys, they said, why don't we start using them? So instead of trying to kill them, let's see if we can make them work for us. So there was a really smart hardware guy, a really smart software guy, and they approached me, and we started making games. And so, you know, I did style a bunch of cabinets, and I did make a bunch of controllers. I became famous for my controllers because I was always trying to make stuff. See that big gun right there? That was for a gun game, you know. If you look closely, the cabinet that's on this rendering right here, it looks like a TIE fighter. It's because it is. I was trying to get the company to go get a Star Wars license, but Atari beat us to the punch. So, so we started trying to work, and we were in what was called a support role. In other words, games would come in from Japan, or games would come in from the captive R&D groups in the company, and we would have to turn them into something. And it was, you know, nobody paid attention to it. It was just those guys over there, they're just support guys. And lo and behold, a guy named Tom Neiman, who's the famous Bally licensing guy, who if you go to enough pinball shows, eventually you'll hear him talk about, is one of the guys that really moved the notion of licensing in our business. And the reason that, you know, you guys have so many licensed themes in your games is because Tom saw some synergy between licensing and entertainment, and he went and got these licenses. So Tom Eamon goes and he gets the Tron license from Disney, and he brings it to us as a video game company. At the time, Midway had these captive R&D groups. One of them was called Dave Nutting and Associates, DNA. And Dave Nutting, Dave Nutting was my hero, right? Dave Nutting would show up at work in a Ferrari, wearing a cowboy hat, with white Levi's that had like cartoons on them, And I was going to work in a tie, and I was a little racy, right? All the engineers had white shirts, I was using something else, but Dave Nutting was my hero. I wanted to be Dave Nutting. And so we tell the company we want to throw our hats in the ring for Tron. And they looked at us and they said, well, Dave Nutting is going to make Tron. Dave Nutting's got a Ferrari and a cowboy hat, and who are you guys? So the company held this internal competition, and what happened is that Dave and the other captive R&D group, an outfit in South Florida called Arcade Engineering. A very nice guy, Ron Halliburton, still in the business, does a lot of novelty games. Ronnie Halliburton's group was the other guy, the other big shot R&D group at Midway. And they were competing with us for the opportunity to do this game. But the way they competed was basically we showed up at the playoffs, if you will, and because we didn't know any better, we had stuff moving on the screen, and I built cabinets, and I made that blue joystick glow, and all this stuff, and we showed up with all this stuff. And those guys showed up with a conversation. And so, and so all of a sudden, we were like in the running. We're making this game, and the company owned Aladdin's Castles arcades, and so they wanted to do this giant competition where every Aladdin's Castle got a Tron, and kids all over the country were going to compete, and then there was going to be a playoff at Madison Square Gardens, with like 30 Tron machines, and so. And the magic of this was the game had to be done in like 6 months or something. And so, with a lot of energy, we got it done. And and then all of a sudden we were, okay, these guys are for real. And then they let us do the next game, etc. So that's and I started with that story because you brought up Tron, and that's the only reason I started with that story. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that. And if I'm going in a direction that you don't like, just tell me, and we'll go back someplace else. And hopefully, later on we can, I've got, you're in the inner sanctum. Only it looks much better in my screen. This computer has got my creative history in it. It's got some stuff in the future that if you saw it, you'd go, wow. So don't anybody please steal this computer. Okay, so I told you I still work the old-fashioned way. I start out working the old-fashioned way. Except that sometimes, this is my home studio, and in my home studio I've got this like fancy Wacom tablet, and now I still use conventional tools, only I use them on a really slick Wacom tablet. It costs as much as a computer. So, so over the course of my career, I've designed lots of different things. This is something I did for Midway in the I want to say in the 2000s, I guess. I pitched. They were always complaining that their fortunes rose and fell based on the popularity of a given video game. And so I got to thinking. I said, what if we had some bread and butter product? What if we had something that had nothing to do with the success of a game? And I said, we are naturals for creating a line of computer peripherals that work with your Xbox and your PlayStation. And because we are known as an arcade game company, we've made all these great, Cruise In, all these big cabinets with all this stuff. So I pitched this, and then I came up with a twist, because my whole thing is always point of difference. Everything I design, in my head, I drive to creating a point of difference. The point of difference, because everybody's got peripherals. So I have a patent on this, which is basically when the Midway peripheral sees the Midway video game, it unlocks things that would only be available to you when you use the Midway peripheral, right? It doesn't mean that the peripheral won't work with, electronic arts games. It will work with an electronic arts game, but when it saw the Midway game, it would say, oh, here's more tracks, more Mortal Kombat guys, more stuff, right? So, so I pitched this thing. Guns were still cool back then. Okay, so
still are.
When you try to demolish the other guy's car, crash him forward, bash him back, tear each other's car apart piece by piece.
You are history.
Crash and bash demo derby comes with everything you see here, backwards, from the hoop.
So I was at Midway for 7 years, from 1978 to 1984. I don't know if you're aware, but in 1984, the video game business crashed. And I went to work. I got out of Midway. I left before they asked me to leave, and I went to work for a toy design consultant. And I invented toys through most of the 80s. And so when I was inventing toys at this consulting firm, it was really cool because I could invent anything I wanted. And so I made all kinds of stuff. And this is just one example of a toy that I invented that went to market. And so the way this worked is these two little trucks were wired, tethered remote, and the parts would come off the trucks, and there was a switch inside the trucks. So when you got the last part off the other guy's truck, your truck died and you won. It was pretty cool. So I invented a bunch of toys, worked in a bunch of different things. So I'm really sad that the Pontiac Motor Company no longer exists, but I was thrilled the day that they called and said, hey, we want to do something with Spy Hunter because the demographic that's going to buy the Pontiac G8 are the guys that were playing your game back in the day. So, so they made this TV commercial and I was thrilled. This is some Spy Hunter stuff from back in the day. You've not seen one that looks like this. You've only seen one that looks kind of like this. That's because this is the original model that I made. Okay, so that's me as the bad guy in Spy Hunter 3. So if you get a Spy Hunter 3 and you put it in your PlayStation, I am trying to rule the world. This is a novelty game that I made for the arcades for Lauren Bromley. This is back in during the first Gulf War, when Gulf Wars were still popular. The artist was Kevin O'Connor, and if you find one of these machines, it says Captain G. Gomez on the side. And this was basically a remake of the old. You remember the old Midway Whirlybirds? Did you ever see those? Right? Except, so in my game, I had all these, the helicopter, was counterweighted and flew in here on this boom. And all these targets were animated, and so the antennas, you had to, the little tank went back and forth in there. You had to, swoop down and hit his antenna, and you blew him up. And then, you can't see it here, but up here there was an old school display that kept track of all the targets and told you what was what. When you saw Wall-E, did you not think crane? Right? Remember that?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
not so unobvious, but you know, guys got to make a living. And then one day, Batman lent me the car. So as I said, you know, I sketch a lot, and I start there. And from sketching, you've seen this kind of stuff before, right? That's the CAD drawing for Batman. So when I work with my engineers, because I spent so much time in mechanical engineering back at Midway, I do not like to throw shit over the fence. Pardon my word. I don't like to throw stuff over the fence. I really think into it, and so my engineers get a lot of this. Now they may change something, they may come back to me and they say, you know, the pivot needs to be over here, the coil needs to be stronger, the motor needs more torque, I don't like the night liner you picked, whatever, but they get a lot of this kind of stuff from me. I also build a lot of foam core stuff. So you're looking at Batman, if you can figure it out, you know, and this is just to kind of get the idea of what I wanted to do. You also notice that it looks like a ramp. That's because, obviously the final one wasn't a ramp, but the original one was. So you can see the crane, the way it ended up. You can see the crane as I originally designed it, right? And so there was going to be see this buck? It was going to pop the ball up into here, and this was going to be the ramp. See that? Mm-hmm. And then, and I don't know why, but I changed my mind. The Joker, you know, I wanted the playing cards to be stand-ups, or I'm sorry, drop targets, inline drop targets, and I wanted them to be like really big, and I wanted the spinner to look like, you know, the bat logo. Right, so what you're seeing, okay, this is where I start, you know, all full of energy, and then, you know, time starts creeping and costs start going up, and reality begins checking in, and then you start like, okay, you know what, I have to design a new spinner, I have to like worry about counterweighting it, and I have to do all these things, and I gotta focus on a big toy, or I gotta focus on the flow or the kinetics or something. I got no time to design a new spinner. New spinner goes away. Okay, so because I'm this hybrid, this designer guy that's like a hybrid engineer artist, I make my artists insane because I hold their hands a lot. So luckily I have a really good working relationship with Kevin O'Connor, and so we've worked together since back in the old Midway days. And so Kevin is not insulted when I send him this, right? But I mean, you know, I'm pretty brutal. I hate these Batmen. Can we use more Joker thugs? You know, right? So he doesn't get too upset. But I hold his hand a lot, right? I say, I want an exploding Batmobile, and then I want a Batmobile icon, and then I want another Batmobile icon. And he's like, okay. So, you know, this cabinet side sort of did itself, right? It's kind of like, you know, you look at the bike and you go, yeah, you know, I gotta. So that's the Photoshop. That's the real deal. I'm not going to torture you through this entire video, but I'll show you a piece of it. When I was a little kid, I grew up, you know, playing street basketball in Chicago. And I've just always wanted to make a pinball basketball game. The playfield design in this game is very interesting. It's got a basket, first of all, because, I mean, it's a basketball game. And you're going to take that pinball and you're going to shoot it through the basket. And there's 4 holes in front of the basket. You can pass the ball from any of those 4 holes to the defender working against you. And he'll go to whatever hole you have the ball in.
just like the real thing.
Get ready for some prime time.
Okay, so this particular game, what's interesting is that this game, all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, people have begun appreciating it. When I did this game, it was like hugely controversial, and it was hugely controversial within Midway, within Williams, because of the fact that I changed the scoring. So to me, basketball scores 1s, 2s, and 3s, and so this was like no end of debate in the the hallowed design halls at Williams. And so, everybody was like, man, you're going to break the game. I'm going to break pinball. I'm going to break them. We made 4,500 of them, so I didn't break it that bad. It was hugely controversial, and that's why this game also has, if you ever, very, very seldom do you see this, but there are some small number of these things were linked. You can play 2 games linked side by side. It's a really fun thing to do. It's a very unlikely thing because you have to own 2 machines. But and we got a linking patent on this. But it's like you got to buy 2 games, put them sit next to each other, and it shows. I've seen it, and it's great fun. It really is because it's like you're trying to outscore me, and 2 scorers are doing this. So it's not you play, I play, you play, I play. We're playing simultaneously. And so that was kind of novel, and it was kind of fun.
The following program is sponsored by Williams Pinball, makers of Monster Bash.
Okay, so that's one of my favorite games that I've ever worked on. It was you can't plan this stuff. Every one of us, every designer I know, never goes into a game thinking that this is a lesser game or this is a greater game. We all put our heart and soul into all these things. For every guy that throws me under a bus for a game they don't like, I guarantee you that I didn't work any less hard on that game than on one that they love. Okay? So it's like a book, it's like a film, it's like anything else. I give it everything I got, every time, the same way. I focus on the same stuff, I pay attention to the same things. Sometimes I get them right, sometimes I don't. Hopefully I get them right more often than I get them wrong. In my career, I've been fortunate. The reason I'm here, the reason I'm doing what I do still, is because I've gotten it right more often than not. But I have to tell you that, it's like people think when they critique us that, we didn't try as hard or that we screwed up. And honestly, we didn't set out to screw up. We didn't set out to do it badly. This is a game where the stars align, and sometimes you get one of those games where every guy on the team was way into it, and so everybody was bringing their best stuff. Vince Pontarelli, phenomenal sound designer, did a remarkable job with the sounds and the speech. Lyman Sheets, phenomenal job with the code. Kevin O'Connor on the art. So we would get together, and I kind of knew we had something because at 3 o'clock, there was a bunch of guys who would gather in Lyman's office to play. And if I didn't go in there and kick people out, they would have played all night. And so while we were developing the game. And so I sort of knew, okay, we got something. And it's unfortunate that it was a really horrible time in pinball. And so there aren't that many of these things out there. But I know you guys love them because I hear about it all the time. I know that the price of these things has gone through the roof, right? Anybody try to buy one lately? Yeah. I'm flabbergasted when I see what they go for. I'm like, whoa, what happened? So it was a lot of fun. It was really a lot of fun. Okay, so most of the Spy Hunters that went into console games are games that I had very little to do with. I had nothing to do with, actually. They were made after my Spy Hunter. The company turned it into a franchise, and it was a valid franchise. They would sell some number of these things for PlayStation and Xbox. In '08, right before Midway blew up, I had finished my last basketball game, and I was pitching a new Spy Hunter, and they were going to make a big deal out of the fact that it was me doing it. So, I don't know what you know about modern video game development, but those things are ridiculously expensive to produce because of the number of people associated with making them. So a pinball design team is about 7 or 8 guys on a good day, right? An artist, a sound guy, designer, a coder, a guy doing dots, etc. It's a fairly small team, a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, right? One of these things is like 100 guys. So it's why they cost, $30 million to make. So when you're the designer, what you have to do is when you talk to management, it's kind of like saying, please write me a check for $30 million. So before they will write you a check for $30 million, you got to somehow convince them that they need to write you a check for $30 million. So what you're going to see is, this is called a treatment. And this is a thing that the designer would put together. Now, the way video game teams work is that 100 guys, they work on a game, and then when that game ships, most of that team gets stripped off and sent to other teams that are working on other games. And the core unit of that team, the key guys, they start thinking about what they're doing next, right? So that small little core team that I ran was like 5 guys, and we put this together to pitch management on a new PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 Spy Hunter, right? So have fun watching this, and I won't torture you too much. By the way, all the 3D models in here, I made. It was like the funnest part of my career, my recent career at Midway, because it was the summer, and I'm a car guy, and I love vehicles and stuff. But when I'm managing a team of 100 guys, I don't get to do anything except track schedules and money. So, and my creative input would be, I would walk in some guy's office and say, I don't like that, change that camera or something. And so when I got to do this, I kind of got to take a step back and work on this. So I shouldn't say all the models in here. I made the big truck with the weapons that you're going to see. Is all my modeling. But I had a really talented guy named Jeff Troutman, who now works for another video game company, and he did the Interceptor and some of the other things. So, but we had a lot of fun doing this. 5 guys working through the summer. Nobody bothered us. No schedules, no money, no nothing. Just 5 guys in a studio having a good time. So watch this, and hopefully you like it. Can we drop the lights a little bit? Anybody? No? Okay. Did you see this?
Yeah.
to introduce some new play mechanics into the old franchise. The notion of the Interceptor having this hover capacity created new, it's a frictionless ground, etc. So you essentially have a new dynamic in terms of having to learn how to move the Interceptor, etc. The idea was that the Interceptor had a secret, and I never needed fuel. That was the good news. The bad news is that it was a nuke. But it was a secret that was kept from everyone. So even the Interceptor pilots didn't know. And so as the game evolved, you learned all these things. And then the final scene in the game, you have a choice to make. The only way that you can defeat this enemy is by using the Interceptor as the nuke and sacrificing yourself to save the day. So it was kind of fun. So can I have $30 million now? That was a lot of fun. It was, when Midway ended, it was very bittersweet for me because, I had a Midway business card for 22 years of my professional career or something. The first 7, and then all the time that I worked on NBA Ballers, the basketball game for PlayStation and Xbox, and so it was really bittersweet in December of '08 when things ended, but time moves on, and it allowed me an opportunity to, all the time that I was at Midway, I had a deal with them that I could design pinball machines because they didn't really compete with the video games I was designing, and so it was during that time that I did Lord of the Rings, Sopranos, etc. So it was really a lot of fun. There's some Interceptor. It occurred to me that the weapons truck in Spy Hunter didn't really have any weapons. So I said, you know what, the weapons truck needs weapons. So the cool thing about the weapons truck having weapons is that you were going to be able, at times you were driving the Interceptor, and at times you were driving the weapons truck. And the other cool thing that I wanted to do was, when you played with your buddy, you could co-op. You could drive the truck and I could drive the Interceptor. I've done consumer products. Have you ever seen a thing that looks like this to fill your tub? I did it. I've done furniture. So, see? In a Macy's window. Every time they sell one of those things, I get a check. It's all good. Okay, so now I have some things that I want to show you. Bringing us back to pinball. So you'll recognize that as the mini playfield on Transformers, and you'll recognize that it's not quite like the mini playfield that you ended up with. But that's the very first one that I put together. And if we go back to it, let's see here. You can see that there's a hole right here because I was going to drop the ball in there. And the idea was going to be to work the ball up, just like you do now, but I was going to drop the ball in here, and I was see where the blue tape is? I was going to let the ball out there. So maybe this would have been better, but the problem that I ran into is that in this design, I didn't have the room for a ramp. So I thought that it was better to give you a right ramp than to eliminate the right ramp so that I could put this in. Everybody asked me about this next one. Even though he's got an Optimus head, he was really going to be Megatron. And the original concept was that you shot, you didn't go in the trough, you shot between his legs. There was a drop target here guarding it, just like there is now. And you shot between his legs, and the balls would cue behind this, and they would come out of the cannon in his hand. And then you asked me, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do this? Anybody know? Money. Yeah, because I ran out of money. I ran out of money and you got what you got. Let's see. Let's look at this. Okay, so this is one of my newfangled 3D computer design tools. I love this tool. You can see what this is, right? And you can see that I did transformers in this tool, right? I'm kind of a nutcase about the details of how things go together. So, like, you know, all this nuttiness in here, making sure that that little snap-in socket fit in there that way, is all stuff that I geek out on. And the problem is that sometimes I geek out on it too much, but my engineers love me because I do a lot of work that really belongs to them. You can see the signature plates, right? If you got an Autobot edition, you got one of these. And if you got a Decepticon edition, you got one of these. What do you see in this? What do you see in this Decepticon edition? You see anything? Anything in there? I mean, I know you can't read. Cybertronian, right? You see a G right there? And you see another G right there? How about that? Bet you didn't know that, did you? See, you thought that was all like Cybertronian. Right, so, I mean, you know, it's painful when I don't have, sometimes I have to do things with what I have, and, you know, this little guy right here, these ramps came out of, they're all made from playfield plastics, and, you know, here's, this is a piece of plumbing. If you can order this from, your local plumbing supply house. So, all right, let's see, let's go to pinball. And let's look at, is camera? No, sorry, give me a second here. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to show you a bunch of stuff that were ideas that didn't make it into the game, because I think you guys would like that. So at one time, there was a 45 that was a ball lock. At one time, there was a suitcase full of money, right? Because everybody needs a suitcase full of money, that is on top of a ramp. There's the original sketch for the Bada Bing. That actually didn't come out too different, right? Except that in this sketch, the balls go right in between, and you can see there's little levers here, because originally I wanted to drive the girls with the actual ball path. Here's how this is what I was trying to tell the engineer to do, and then we ended up with something closer to this. All right, there's the fish. See my fish right there, and the Bada Bing. So now you're beginning to get to okay, here was the suitcase full of money. I wanted to move all the balls from this side to this side. It's an old pinball thing that I saw in an old game. I thought it was cool. The Stugatz, the yacht, trying to fit him in around a ramp. At one time the truck was going to be a feature where you're going to hijack the truck. Here's my Kevin O'Connor, I'm going to torture you sketch. Okay, here's the safe. Here's all the stuff on how the safe works. At one time, you don't know this, but you see, at one time I wanted to have a magnet in front of the safe, right? There's the safe. Different safes, Okay, here's the Sopranos playfield you've never seen, right? Does Sopranos have an upper flipper on the left? No. Does Sopranos have a crossing ramp? No. So, this is a valid playfield. I don't remember why I went away from it, but 3 drop targets over here. hijack truck target over here, and then an outer loop and an inner loop, a VUC that would move the ball over here and then over here. And then the bada bing, I wanted the bada bing to be lined with LEDs, you know, like the footlights on the stage, right? Yeah, so that didn't see the light of day. There's the Stugats, and of course it has to be a 2-ball multi-ball. Nobody gets that joke? Okay. All right, I want y'all to go look up Stugats. Veroni Sanitation, one of my favorites. See, we were gonna move, the truck was gonna be like a berry target, right? Hit the target, move the truck, hit the target, move the truck. Do not use timing belts. Yeah. So, that is some soprano stuff that you've never seen, right? And then, let's see here. Let's go into, come on. Let's look at, what do you want to look at?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. All right. I may have it queued up here. File. Lord of the Rings. Big monster. Oh yeah, here it is. #1 on the hit parade. There it is. Okay, so you see all this stuff? This is back in the days when I used to work in AutoCAD. This is what we had to do, right? And so, like, look at all these. Here's all this is my kit of parts, right? Like all the inserts and things, and I grab them around. Here's a side view of that VUC, you know? Ball comes up here, boom, like that, and then it's in the RAM. You know, here's a side view of the cabinet, right, just to make sure I could fit all the stuff in, right? My buddy the Balrog, you know, was going to touch the glass. See that? Yeah, he was going to touch the glass, and he did. The ring, this was painful. This was, you know, look at this. This was painful to me. This was like, I was lost my mind designing this. You know, and all that stuff, you know, here's a ramp, right? All this pain, this is just pain, right? You guys just see it as cool. It's so cool, but I gotta do this. I'm stuck doing this. Let's see. Right, here's, you know, when we do playfield plastics, right? That's a nested sheet of playfield plastics. 2 sets coming off the game, you know? Here's a layout that basically tells people where everything goes. You know, my sword ramp, all that stuff. Let me see if I can find you. You may want to see Lord of the Rings sketches if I can find them. Ramps running.
How many hours did you put into that AutoCAD?
Oh my God, you have no idea. Oh, look at that. Let's see, let me turn it. There's where it started. See? Helm's Deep over here, not so much, huh? That didn't make it. Look where the towers are.
What's the ring toy?
The ring toy was over here in this one, right? It had, you see there's a 3-bank in there? You were gonna hit it, and it was gonna spin. How about that? And let me see what else I got here. Oh, there's a map. There's a map because you got to know where you're going. I had to get, you know, I've told this story many times, and if you've heard it, you know, please tolerate me. So when I started doing this game, I had read this story when I was a little kid. And, you know, I liked it, but I read a lot, and I was not gaga over this. But, you know, I was not like a fanboy relative to this. But my partners in crime, you know, Chris Branner and Keith Johnson were like nutcases over this. So one day we're having a team meeting, and I go in there and I said to the guys, they said, what goes over here? And I said, you know that big red fire guy. They lost their minds. They lost their minds. Dude, that's the Balrog. You know, yeah, whatever. It's the big red fire guy. He goes right here. All right, let's see what I got here. Let me see. Let's find out. Okay, so this is closer to reality, isn't it? This is beginning to get closer to reality here, except that there's some drop targets here, right? And those weren't there. And the ring toy is still here. See that? It's not back here, even though I was thinking that there was going to be a ramp there. But you see how this gets out of the way of the ramp? You know, you see this piece right here? And if you look right there, that would be blocking the ramp, and then it would turn sideways, and then it would let you up the ramp. Right? You can't see this too well, right? Because these are scanned. But... oh, look, there's my sword. Everybody likes this thing. Right? Let's see here. There. That's the one I first showed you. All right. I don't know what this was. Oh, here's a Fangor toy. I didn't make it. All right. All right. What else do you want to see?
New stuff.
Pinball 2000. Oh,
Yeah.
let's see. Yeah, somewhere. Yep, there you go. See the layout of the saucers? This is when I was playing with different configurations for those lights. Here's the old Williams insert set, right? This is my little toy kit, you know, my little tool kit that I would start with. And then, you know, we ended up with this. Right? Let's see here. Now I did an interesting thing on this game. There was a lot of conversation about flipper distance. You know, how far the flippers were on pinball machines, and you remember that we were trying to bring pinball back. We were trying to teach people how to play pinball. And so I started looking at other designers' flipper spacing, and I did this big study, and I figured that, and so what I came up with was that, you know, some guys were here, some guys were here, and some guys were here, and I believe I ended up, where did I end up? I ended up with some mixture of all of these. I believe I ended up here, 6 3/4 apart. And why does, I mean, we're talking about very, very different, look at this flipper spacing, right? Look at the space between the flippers right there. Look at the space here, right? And then look at the space here.
Yeah.
I don't think you want to play this guy's game, huh? So, lots of geeking out on stuff that, I mean, it all looks easy to you guys. Interesting thing, if I can find it here, is this game was made with, I actually made two playfields, two versions of this game. I made one that was 43 inches long, which is what shipped, but I started out with the standard 46-inch long playfield. And I actually had one somewhere. Is it this one? Oh, here. So here's the original game, right? I brought it in as reference to make sure I was doing it right, because the original game was something that you guys loved. So this was the original Attack, and this was Revenge. And let's see if I can open. Here's the wealth of. This one maybe. here's an insert. Here's an insert layout that you haven't seen, right? This is not what shipped. Look at this. Right? Oh, here's, you know, we redid the bottom arches. Remember that, the transparent one? So okay, so I'm here and I got 5 minutes. So I'm gonna cut this out. So, Jesus. All right, let's take some questions. Yes, sir.
I got a transformer, and when you a transformer is throw, when you shoot up the ball at times, it gets stuck on his foot and under the right ramp. Is there a fix to that?
Probably. It's probably already in your game. It's probably the ramp is up too high. It's probably the way your ramp is assembled. But yeah, I'll take a look at it if you know, or I'll show you what I'm talking about. I try to.
What was that for Lord of the Rings?
Well, so for Lord of the Rings, what's interesting to me was that, I don't know what's interesting to me, but it was where I was trying to go. What I was trying to do is, I was trying to do a more open play field. I was trying to do a play field where no matter where you shot the ball, something happened. And as opposed to, if you look at the standard 7-shot array, you know, bum, 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 you guys call it the fan, right? I try to go away from the fan. I try to make it more organic, and I try to make it so that no matter where the ball shot, there was a reflection into something cool.
You see the people arcade guys down there with their simulation stuff?
The video stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you thought, I've been talking to those guys a lot, and I was thinking, what about concurrent releases with, like, say, CERN, so that you, like, when you come out with a new game,
Yeah.
the video game side, so you're working with them, and then create a bigger buzz for pinball in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a real viable, it's a viable thing. I don't know if it's, concurrent, but really close, probably. Yeah. Because the problem with, we move at a pretty fast pace, and what they do requires a lot of work, right? It's like they're making a video game, and so they will react to us, but they'll be slightly staggered. But yeah, it's a viable thing, sure. Amy? Yes, sir.
When you start a pinball machine, what are you given just the name? Or what do you
It depends on what it is, but usually, yeah. I mean, if it's a license, you get, hey, you want to work on Batman? You immerse yourself in the mythos of Batman, and you say, okay, I think that sometimes if it's a film, sometimes you get a script, so you know what's going to happen in the film, and you make decisions, right? Like on Batman, it's a classic example, right? Is there a crane in the movie? No. Is there a crane anywhere in the Batman fiction? No. Why is there a crane in Batman? Because I thought it was cool. Yes, sir.
Do you keep up with like the stuff that's happening in the pachinko market?
I do not. Pachinko, I don't know pachinko very well. Years ago, I had the good fortune of going to the Japanese game show, and I saw a lot of pachinko, but I don't know enough about pachinko. Yes, sir.
You mentioned in another talk, I think at Expo, that there's going to be quite a few changes possibly to the Stern product.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And obviously, not specifics, but in terms of say the machine we're seeing now.
Yes.
I mean, how many iterations are we away from some of these changes? Are we going to see the same, an AC/DC type machine for another
Right.
machines, or are we?
You're going to see. Okay, so one of the things that's happened with us is we've had some success with the stratification of a product line, the creation of a Pro, the creation of limited editions, the creation of multiple limited editions. That will probably remain. There may be even further stratification in some ways, maybe into areas that are new to us, But the general thing that you're going to see is you're going to see. I believe that a lot of quality issues are not the fault of a guy screwing something together on an assembly line. I believe that a lot of quality issues are design related. I believe that we have to design quality into the thing. And that means material selection, that means process selection, that means assembly techniques, that means all of those things. It means procurement, how the material gets moved in the plant. It means all kinds of things. I've only been there since July. I'm Vice President of Game Development, if you don't know. And I have a vision in my head to take us into the future, but I can't, I can't wave my arm and make it happen overnight. So it's going to take some time, and it will probably slide in bits and pieces. You'll be seeing this, you'll be seeing that. And I'm talking about changes to the platform. A ball and flippers, just to put you at ease, is never going away. Okay? It's never going away. That's sacred. Everything else is up for discussion. So I come from, I hope that I showed you that I come from lots of different places. I look at things comprehensively. I've made my career out of looking into the future for people. That's what people pay me to do. They pay me to look into the future and bring them some options. Do this, try this, let's go here. I think our product needs some of that. But I think that our product needs to, there are segments of our product that do not need any change. So you'll see it in bits and pieces.
Has there ever been a pinball that instead of having the flippers right in the center, either have two sets of
Yes.
them?
Yes, and if you, and go on the internet, I'm sure you'll find it. Yeah.
Black hole.
Not only two sets of them, you'll see all kinds of goofy configurations. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What would you say is the average total man hours that goes into research and development for a game?
That's a good question. It's actually something I'm looking into right now, because you have probably 7 or 8 guys working for the equivalent of 6 man months each, and that's only R&D. That doesn't entail all of the iteration on the product and all the stuff in front, all the stuff behind. But I'm looking at it a lot. Somebody else, yeah.
With the muscle car wars starting back up, do you foresee doing any more automotive themed pinball machines?
I'm a huge fan of automotive, but the problem is that, you remember, I've got basically, in the course of a year, I've got 3 or 4 bullets. And every one of my bullets has to count. Because, I would love it imagine if this room was 5 times the size and it was filled, right? And if that was the case, I absolutely would be sliding a Mustang game in, sliding something else in. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. It means that I have to figure out a way to, if 1/3 of the Ford dealers in this country told me that they would put a Mustang game in the waiting area of their service department, I would see it. I would do it because I would not hit all the places that I typically hit with a broad theme, but I would make up for it with something like that. So it's not out of the question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
With the success that you had with Lord of the Rings, can we expect you to do something with The Hobbit?
Perhaps.
Of the upcoming projects that you have that you're actually allowed to talk to us about, which one are you most excited about right now?
That's hard to say because I've got some really talented guys, right? I mean, Steve Ritchie's sitting right there. I get excited about, like, when I see the passion that those guys bring to something. I get excited about that, right? So I saw AC/DC Whitewoods. I shot AC/DC Whitewoods. I knew he had something, right? I could feel it. And the day that those LEDs came up and I saw a blue game, we were all standing around going, wow, like little kids. So I get excited about that stuff. We have some really cool stuff. The tricolor LEDs, that just started, and And what's fun about a new technology, you know, is a guy like Steve comes up with it, he pioneers it, and then the next guy takes it, turns it sideways, and makes something cooler out of it, right? And so they evolve, right? This is a guy that's done that, like, you know, 100 million times in his career, right? I mean, how many things do we take for granted, you know? And you know the list, right? You know, how many things do we take for granted that the man invented, and yet look at the evolution of them, you know? I mean, look at how we handle multi-ball. Look at all the things that he's invented, right? And I've got guys all around me like that, right? So I've got guys thinking about how to make the game more approachable. I've got guys, I've got John Borg working on his next game, you know, and you know, if you like Tron, I think you're gonna like this next one, you know, and so stuff like that. I mean, I get excited about all of them. Yes, sir.
What's the hardest or craziest physical element to put in a pinball game?
Fun. You know what? A pinball machine is inherently fun, right? What's the first rule of pinball? What's the first rule of pinball?
Pull the plunger.
The ball is wild.
Keep the ball in play, right? Keep the ball in play, right? And if you every pinball machine in that room, you can walk up to them and you can say, this one is more fun than that one. But the reality is that even the one that you think is least fun is entertaining and fun in and of itself, because the very first rule of pinball is keep the ball in play, right? And so that in and of itself is fascinating and fun. The game is inherently fun. You know, to sort of expound on your question a little bit, it's tougher to, you know, it's like somebody sets the bar, it's tough to, you know, to challenge that bar, right? It's, you know, I've done it with games, this guy's done it like a million times, right? I mean, look at his game now, right? I got everybody back there's going, okay, we got a top AC/DC, how do we do that, right? Because that's a lot of fun, so.
Just a quick question. Do you know what's going to be rerun the rest of the year for games? Like, there's all kinds of rumors that, like, Tron's coming back again and some other stuff.
I know what's going to be rerun, yes.
One question, I attended your seminar, your Ninjas from the Ceiling seminar.
Yes.
Would you have any quick reflections you could share now that you couldn't share then? About that day? Or for a later time?
No, I mean, I'll talk about it. For anybody who doesn't know what he's talking about, when we did Pinball 2000, at the culmination of Pinball 2000, at the expo that occurred the weekend before Williams Electronics pulled the plug on pinball, I was the featured speaker. And so I gave this talk, and I had someone inside the company had told me, and I was the only guy that knew. No one else knew, other than like a couple of vice presidents. No one else knew that the plug was going to get pulled that day. And so it was very sad for me to stand in front of these, you know, a crowd like you, with all of my Pinball 2000 stuff behind me, and all of the story of the making of, and all the fans and games out in the, you know, and this was after the second model, so John Papaduke's Star Wars game had already been made, and you know, there was a tournament, and it was full of games and everything else, and I basically had to say, you know, I fear for the future of pinball, and you know, I said at that particular moment in time, not knowing that one day I was going to end up working for Stern Pinball, I said at that particular time that, you know, Gary Stern might just be the last man standing, and that was, I never imagined that, you know, a couple of years later he was going to call me and say, hey, you know, can you do a pinball for me? So, yeah. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Are you the guy now that wears the cowboy hat and drives Ferrari?
In a much more modest way. But yes, I realized my dream, if you will. I did realize my dream.
How do we bring the arcade back?
I'm sorry?
How do we bring the arcade back?
You know what? So I had a very nice, comfortable position designing slot machines when Gary called me and said, come
company of pinball machines. And I was working at Incredible Technologies, Golden Tee Golf, right? And I had I worked 8 to 5, and I was well compensated, and I loved the people I worked with. And there was something that I felt that there's a bit of a renaissance in the works. There's a guy that has an arcade right outside of Chicago in the suburbs called Galloping Ghost. It's full of 80s stuff, and he's got pinball. And the arcade, I think the arcade as we know it may not come back, but the arcade in a new way may come back. And I think pinball is definitely, my feelers, my spider sense says we're in the genesis of a renaissance. Or I wouldn't be back here doing this. I really have fun doing this, by the way. I absolutely, positively love getting up in the morning and going to work every day.
Okay,
Turn mine off.
Yes. Anyway, we're cutting close on our time here, but like I said, George is around for some more time this weekend, so you can kind of pull him aside or with a group, and maybe two can play a game. But I'm gonna ask George just to kind of go to the table in the back, and then if you guys can get in line for him and get your pieces signed, we would appreciate it. And thank you so much for attending.